There is nothing wrong with your television. Do not attempt to adjust the picture.
Night falls hard again. Another tale to tell you, friend. Twisted stories in the dark, like shadows on the park. You think you know, but you don't. Is it real? Is it fake? A monster at the gate. Anthology of evil. Anthology of evil. Short tales of the dead, creeping inside your head. Oh, 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 oh. Every week a different fight. Some things are black and white, or shades of gray and gloom, sealed inside a tomb. You think you're safe, but you ain't. Is it real? Is it fake? A monster at the gate. Anthology of evil.
Welcome, boils and ghouls, to another bonus episode of me acting like the Crypt Keeper. Just kidding. It's another bonus episode, but I'm not going to be doing a Crypt Keeper voice throughout, I promise. My lighting effects, my Halloween lights from outside I brought in. Hope it's not too distracting. You don't need to see my ugly face anyway. We're talking about my top 10 favorite horror anthology TV shows and movies in this, and I'm gonna start with the TV shows. Horror anthology is just one of those. First of all, if you're new to this, I do my normal podcast, Tales from the 90's, where I pick a month and a year of the 90's and talk about it. But I do a bonus episode each month, and never know what it's going to be. But October, obviously, I try to make it a Halloween theme. Last year, my very first bonus episode was my top 50 horror movies of all time. This one, I wanted to do sort of also in the Halloween vein, but I wanted to do anthologies. And I was like, well, do I want to do TV shows or movies? And I kind of wanted to do both, so that's what I'm going to do. Like I said, I'm going to talk about the TV shows first, and then talk about the movies. Anthology is just if you don't know what it is, it's a bunch of different stories made up into one. Well, try that again. For movies, it's usually a bunch of different stories that make up one movie. Sometimes they have a wraparound story that goes, overarching story that goes with the whole thing. But for TV, it is a series that, it'll have like a theme song, obviously, and some have a host, some don't. But each week will be a different story. And on some of these, some of them are connected somehow, but a lot of them are just standalones. And so I wanted to put a list together of my favorite of these, because that's my favorite type of storytelling thing. Sure, I like long, regular full-length movies or TV shows that, have a season where, you got characters you get used to and, ongoing stories. But I really like the anthology thing because you never know what you're going to get. So that's what I wanted to do with this, is talk about my favorite anthology TV shows at first. And I'm going to do 10 to 1, And again, this is my rankings. Probably not going to be anybody else's rankings. Some of these I'm sure will be on there, but your rankings might be different. But I'm going to start with number 10, and that is Freddy's Nightmares. Yeah, Freddy's Nightmares was a TV show, obviously based on the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. It had Freddy in it. And it was 2 seasons over 44 episodes, so it wasn't on very long, and I didn't watch it in its heyday. I only found out about it. It was out in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. I only found out about it in the mid-2000s. But obviously hosted by Freddy, and it's set in Springwood, which is, of course, the town where his Elm Street is. But if you listen to him, of course, every town has an Elm Street, which I found to be true. I mean, let me know in the comments if you have a town that doesn't have an Elm Street. It would prove Freddy wrong. He might come after us, though. But, and by the way, if you see me looking this way, I've got facts written out about the stuff. Just so that way I can keep it straight. So, not like I'm looking away from the camera. I'm just trying to read the facts here. But anyway, like I said, it's hosted by Freddy and set in Springwood, and Freddy appears throughout the show. He'll start off the show and, randomly appear either right before commercial sometimes, right after commercial sometimes. But, he moves along the story, and he's not just like a host. He's actively affected because the whole premise of it is, a lot of the stuff that happens to these people happens in their dreams. And it's not just, the normal Freddy format of Freddy coming after him. Freddy will, make things happen to him. You can tell that Freddy's behind everything, but it's not just, him coming out and getting them with the claw. They couldn't do that for a TV series anyway, but also it would get, old if, over a course of, like I said, it was 2 seasons and 44 episodes. But, except for the very first episode, all episodes contain 2 storylines that are connected, and each one's a half hour, so it's an hour show. Well, of course, as you know, for TV, it's 22 minutes is a half hour, and an hour show is 45 minutes long, because, you gotta have time for those commercials. But, yeah, something happens during the first part of the show, and then sometimes a character from that, or maybe just, if it takes place at a hospital or something, maybe that hospital will be part of the second story, but that's kind of the connection on them. And then sometimes the stories will actually, you'll see more about the characters or the things that happened in a later episode. Not always just the next one, just later on. So it's one of those ones that, some of the anthology ones you can watch in any order. With these, you can still watch in any order and still understand it, but it's probably best to watch in chronological order of the way they were released. But my favorite episodes, I'll try to give favorite episodes of each one as an example. The first one's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. And it's the very first episode. And it's actually serves as a prequel for the first Nightmare on Elm Street. Where you see... let me see, where is it? Yeah, you see Freddy, being caught, and, you actually see how... Because as you can, if you know Nightmare on Elm Street, he was a child murderer who got caught, but due to some technicality, I think it was the search warrant wasn't signed properly or something, they had to let him go, and all the parents got together and burned him alive, which is how he got his appearance, and he was, able to come back from the dead. This one serves as a prequel for that, which is really cool, since we never got a full prequel Nightmare on Elm Street movie, which I'm surprised we didn't. No, we got that crappy remake, but that's another story. The second one of my favorite episodes is called It's a Miserable Life. It's about a teen working at a fast food restaurant, and then things go crazy, and his girlfriend ends up shot, and he ends up dead. But see, the second part of it is, picks up with his girlfriend, because the guy is the main focus of it. All this crazy stuff happened at this fast food restaurant he don't want to work at. But the crazy stuff happens to him, and then he ends up dying, and his girlfriend's, trying to, talk him through it. But like I said, he ends up shooting her, and she goes to the hospital, and that's kind of where the second half hour takes up, is her in the hospital and all this creepy stuff that's going on overnight at the hospital. Another one is Mother's Day. It's about a teenager who meets a girl who convinces him to throw this party. And he's got a new stepdad, and him and his mom are off on a honeymoon, and him and his stepdad don't get along, which I can identify with. But yeah, this girl he meets convinces him to throw this party, and things just go crazy. The second segment includes a radio psychologist that one of those ones are you always see, it's a stereotype, but you always see the radio psychologist with a bad attitude, and they're giving bad advice and don't care. Well, she ends up unknowingly giving some bad advice to her daughter. I think she, what can I say on YouTube? Unalives herself or something like that. And, she finds out later that she was the one that made her do it. But another one is Prisoner of Love and Life Sentence. These are 2 different episodes. But like a lot of episodes, they continue the same story from one to the other. And, of course, each one has the 2 stories. The first story is about a priest who's giving last rites to a woman on death row and ends up getting seduced by her and ends up trying to help her escape, and it has deadly consequences. I don't want to give away the whole endings of these things. the following episode contains other people that were in the prison at the same time. So it's like I said, a sort of continuance, you know. Like I said, you don't have to watch in order, but to get the full story and full understanding, it's probably best to. Next up is number 9. Number 9 is Creepshow the series. Now, this might rank higher if it would have been around when I was younger. Because there's always something about those episodes that when you're younger that you always seem to like that TV versus now. But also, it didn't have many seasons of it, and of course, I'll be talking about Creepshow and the Anthology movies. That's a given. But the series for Creepshow had 4 seasons over 25 episodes, and I think there are only one on my list that was just streaming only, and it was on Shudder. Each episode had 2 segments that were hosted by the Creep from Creepshow. Again, he doesn't like say anything. He just kind of sits there, just like in the movie. He's meant to be like the Crypt Keeper, because Creepshow was based on the EC comics from the 50s, which is Tales from the Crypt. So that's why, he looks like he's the Crypt Keeper, even though it's not. And the Creep never says anything. Except in Creepshow 2, the movie, he talks, but I don't know if that's the same creep or supposed to be different. Anyway, I'm not talking about the movies yet. I'm talking about the show. My favorite episodes are with a lot of things. Sometimes the first episode will be your favorite. In this case, it's one of my favorites. It's called Gray Matter, and if you know anything about Creepshow, the movie was created by George Romero, of course, Night of the Living Dead fame, and Stephen King. Well, Stephen King wrote this episode called Gray Matter. It was a short story in his collection, The Night Shift, which those short story collections are sort of like horror anthologies. Where you get the novels, it's like a full-length movie. You get his short story collection, which is a lot of good stuff you find there. A lot of whole different, never the same story, definitely in a row in those type of collections. But anyway, in this one, Gray Matter, it actually stars Adrienne Barbeau, who played Just Call Me Billy from the original Creepshow movie. She not her same character, obviously, because she got eaten. But I'm getting called by somebody here. Potential spam. Who cares? But yeah, she plays a bartender, and it's about a story about this guy that turns into like a gelatinous monster. It's so creepy. That was a segment of the first one. I can't remember if that was the whole episode or just one of the segments. Yeah, it was one of the segments. Another one I really liked was episode 4, the first segment. It's called The Companion. It's about a young boy named Harold and a scarecrow. And I guarantee you that is a Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark reference. Not obviously the scarecrow in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was named Harold. But that can't be a coincidence that the boy's named Harold and he runs into a scarecrow. But anyway, the boy finds a scarecrow and uses him to go after his brother who's bullying him. And he's not just typical, picking on your younger brother type stuff. He's at one point he's chasing this kid through the woods trying to literally kill him. He's abusive. He's not just a bully. It's a whole different level, but he uses a scarecrow to help him with that. Episode number 5, the first segment, is called Night of the Paw. And it's sort of a take on the old Monkey's Paw story. There's been in Tales from the Crypt and a million other things, and of course everybody knows the original story. But in this one, it involves a woman who killed her husband. And then she crashed, she's running away and she crashes her car, and a funeral home director finds her and takes her there, and it's revealed that it was a mercy killing on her dying husband. That's why she killed him. And the funeral home director apparently knows that. He wished for somebody to come and kill him because he's got a disease and he wants to die, so the Monkey's Paw brings her there, and she actually uses the paw to accidentally make her husband and others that were dead in the morgue come back as zombies, and she gets eaten. Typical twist thing there that you'll find in Tales from the Crypt. Obviously, the EC Comics is definitely rubbing off on Creepshow. Survivor Type is another one. It was a special animated episode. It wasn't specifically in a season. It was in between seasons, and it was animated only. It was in between the first and second seasons, I think. But it was based on a Stephen King short story. from the collection Skeleton Crew, which like I said, another short story collection. It's about a guy that's shipwrecked, and he just goes insane and ends up eating his own like body and doesn't even realize it. There's nobody else on this island. He can't get off of it. He's dying. He ends up basically eating himself. And then one final one is from season 3. It's episode 6, the second segment, called A Dead Girl Named Sue. It's an episode in black and white, and it's set during the events of Night of the Living Dead. So while the zombie outbreak's going on, this episode happens, So, of course, the George Romero connection there. Like I said, great series. I think I heard recently that it was over. They weren't going to make any more. I have the first season on Blu-ray. I'd like to get the whole thing, though. Now, coming in at number 8. Number 8 is, because this is my list and I can make up the rules, number 8 is actually a tie between Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? Because I couldn't pick out which one I wanted to put, and it was hard to put those on there. It's like with the other stuff, because the other stuff is like more adult content, and I don't mean that kind of content, but you know what I mean, like those type of shows. You think of stuff like Twilight Zone and all that stuff as adult, shows, Tales from the Crypt. You think of Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark as kids shows. But they're anthologies, and I didn't know where to put them on the list, so I actually decided, put them together at number 8. Obviously, these both ranked higher on my Saturday morning cartoons and Nickelodeon lists, because they were, so put them in at number 8 doesn't mean I don't like them. It's just on this list of anthology when, you're looking for scary stuff. Obviously, it's scary for kids, but it's, obviously tame for adults, but not if you watched it during my time. Some of these episodes were creepy. But anyway, some favorite episodes, of course, Goosebumps, based on the R.L. Stine Scholastic books that came out in the early 90s, became insanely popular. Goosebumps had 4 seasons, over 72 episodes, and I'm only counting the originals, not like things they've done since then. They were on Fox, like I said. They're based on R.L. Stine's books. My favorite episodes of those are The Haunted Mask, which of course was the very first episode of the series, like on TV. I remember that premiered on like Friday night, and that was like a huge deal. The Haunted Mask 2, which picks up where the events of that one left off, is a good one. The Cuckoo Clock of Doom, I love that one. I remember that one vividly. The kid turning the cuckoo bird's head around, and it makes him go backwards in time. And Night of the Living Dummy 2, which is the the one where Slappy's introduced, and of course Slappy basically becomes the face of the Goosebumps franchise, especially when they do the movies with Jack Black. The Goosebumps 1 and 2. Slappy's really like the face of it, because he's one of the most popular characters from the Goosebumps series. And it came from beneath the sink, just because of that creepy sponge. And I was so scared of that freaking sponge. That and freaking, I can't stand those potatoes with eyes. Like, they look like freaking mutated potato monsters coming after me. I hate them things. Ask my wife. I hate them things. But then we got Are You Afraid of the Dark, which of course was originally a Canadian series that they brought over to Nickelodeon and just put on SNCC on Friday nights or Saturday nights, and we all fell in love with Are You Afraid of the Dark. They had 7 seasons, over 91 episodes on Nickelodeon. Of course, first run. I know they've had a couple re-releases, not re-releases, but rebooting the show back up. I haven't seen all of those. But favorite episodes of those are The Tale of the Laughing in the Dark. It's about Zeebo the Clown. Everybody, if you remember Are You Afraid of the Dark, remember the Zeebo the Clown. And the kid that steals his nose from the funhouse. The Tale of the Shiny Red Bicycle. This is one that always stuck with me. It's like a ghost story. It's about a ghost of a person's best friend who died in a bicycle accident, and he keeps seeing the friend that didn't die keeps seeing the bicycle and is trying to figure out what's going on. The Tale of the Long Ago Locket. And this actually features Will Friedle from Boy Meets World, who played Eric. He's transported back into the Revolutionary War. He has to help a soldier return to his girlfriend before he's killed. And The Tale of Cutter's Treasure, which was a 2-part episode. It's about the ghost of an evil pirate being released when a teenager finds a spyglass. It's inside a treasure chest at a magic shop. And then The Tale of the Dead Man's Float. It's about 2 kids that discovered that their school had like a secret hidden swimming pool. And they find out why this swimming pool was like sectioned off and like nobody knew about it. So yeah, some great kids shows there. A lot of creepy moments in it too. But I definitely believe they deserve a spot on the list. Sorry if I kind of did a cop out there by having them tied, so I can slip another episode or another series into this. But I didn't know, where to rank one over the other, or I just wanted to give them a spot together. Like I said, I don't care if it gets another show on the list. Good, it's another show I can talk about. And speaking of that, we're gonna go on to number 7 now. Seven's a kind of difficult one to talk about because there's actually 4 versions of this show. 3 of them I like. The other one I've only seen a couple episodes. It was pretty good. But anyway, it's The Twilight Zone. The Twilight Zone, like I said, there's 4 versions. The first one, obviously iconic, featured Rod Serling. Rod Serling. Why did I think that was wrong? I thought for a minute his name was Rod Sirloin. It's a steak. I'm hungry, you can tell. Rod Serling doing the intro and the outro, and then sometimes would do like little interludes in the episode. But they were like generally half-hour episodes, each of their own story. The original series was 1959 to 1964, 5 seasons, over 156 episodes on CBS. My favorite episode of that was Nightmare at 20,000 Feet. This one actually featured William Shatner, and it's the only one on a. William Shatner is the only person on this plane that sees a gremlin on the wing, and he ends up getting a gun and shooting it off the plane. And as he's wheeled away to the mental hospital, once the plane lands, he's the only one that can see the damage to the engine on the plane from the gremlin, and of course everybody's going to die. The second, which of course that becomes part of the Twilight Zone movie, one of the stories on that, but that's the original one but the second version of the Twilight Zone ran from 85 to 89, and it's of course the one I remember watching the most because it was, during the 80s. It ran for 3 seasons, 65 episodes on CBS, and then was in syndication. Didn't have an on-screen host, like with Rod Serling. I cannot say that guy's name. Rod Serling. Oh my god, am I saying his name right? I'm having a moment here. I am literally looking up to make sure I'm saying his name right, because I feel like I'm mangling this. I believe it is Rod Serling. You know what, I'm not even going to bother looking up. It's Rod Serling, or it's Rod whatever the hell I want to say. Rod Sirloin, okay? Anyway, this one didn't have an on-screen host. And sometimes would have more than one segment in an episode, because it was like an hour long. So, more often than not, you would get a couple episodes. Sometimes 3 if they put in like a really short one. But, favorite episode or segment was called Shatterday. Yes, I said that right, Shatterday. Featuring Bruce Willis, actually. And he was already a big star by then. Obviously, Die Hard had already been out. But, he accidentally calls his own like phone number and like talks to like his like alter ego, like his alter ego version of himself. It's a really weird but really cool episode. The third series ran from 2002 and 2003. It had 1 season only of 43 episodes, and it was on UPN, featuring Forrest Whitaker as the Rod Serling Sirloin guy. That he played basically his role, the on-screen host. And my favorite episode from this was called Memphis, featuring Eric LaSalle, of course, from my all-time favorite movie, Coming to America. He played Mr. Soul Glow. He played him in it. The Prince of Soul Glow? Now I'm doing Louis Anderson. Sorry, we're not talking about Coming to America. That should be its own episode one day, just me talking about that show, that movie. Anyway, the episode's called Memphis, featuring Eric LaSalle. He's a law clerk with like an inoperable tumor, brain tumor, I think it is. He only got 6 months left to live, and he finds himself teleported back to Memphis the day Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated, and you know, he knows what's going to happen. He's trying to stop it. And like I said, talking earlier about that Gremlin one, Twilight Zone actually had a movie, and it's an anthology movie. It didn't make my top 10 list, but it was from the 80s, and it was said to be cursed, just like Poltergeist was said to be cursed, you know, with the deaths that surrounded that. But people actually died during the film of this movie. An actor and 2 child actors, and they weren't even hired like legally. They found out later on was like died during a freak accident during filming. Like that was just a cursed movie itself. But you know, I said didn't quite make my list. I had it in the running for it, but in the end it didn't. But the Twilight Zone definitely, you know, 3 versions of it. Like I said, there's a newer version. I may have seen 1 or 2 episodes, but not enough to include it. But definitely Twilight Zone holds a place, you know, for me in horror anthology. But up next is number 6. Hosted by our favorite steak guy, Rod Sirloin Steak. Rod Serling. He created this just like he did with the Twilight Zone. This was later on in the 70s. It lasted 3 seasons, 43 episodes on NBC. And I have the box set of this. It was actually spun off from a movie they did. They did a movie with, I think, three different segments in it. And, you know, that kind of turned into like a pilot for the series. And Rod Serling is the host of it. And it's the night gallery itself is like a, you know, painting gallery where they have artwork. And he's like introducing the paintings. And then each painting like basically turns into a story. Well, each episode had 2 and sometimes 3 segments. Like I said with the Twilight Zone from the 80s earlier. Sometimes these segments would be like, there'd be like sometimes 4, but each, you know, they'd have a couple that were like literally 4 or 5 minutes a piece, sometimes even less. My favorite segments were The Merciful. Is about a woman who looks like she's sealing her suffering husband up behind a brick wall, and at the end the doorbell rings and the guy gets up to answer it, revealing the woman actually sealed herself off. She like had cancer and was dying. The Dead Man is about a hypnotist who hypnotizes prisoners and ends up it always ends up going wrong. Like he makes this one think they're in a plane crash, and the guy actually is like bodies going through like what's going on during this plane crash. One called Since Aunt Ada Came to Stay. It's a man that suspects his wife's aunt is a witch, and turns out to be true, and like she goes like crazy on him. Phantom of What Opera, another one of them really short ones like the Merciful, featuring Leslie Nielsen as like the Phantom of the Opera, and it's as funny as it is scary. Number 5 is called Monsters. Had 3 seasons of 72 episodes that were all in syndication. And I remember watching this with Tales from the Dark Side in the 80s. But as I grew up, of course, I remembered Tales from the Dark Side. I'd forgotten Monsters because I think I had just, like, as a kid, you don't, like, fully get the, you know, grasp the concept of things. I was thinking the episodes of Monsters were the Twilight Zone. But I remembered the opening of Monsters because it's an anthology show, obviously. It wouldn't be on the list. But it has an opening of like this family watching the actual show Monsters. And these are like aliens things. The dad looks like a potato head looking guy. But I always remember seeing that. And I thought it was a commercial advertising the show. So when I finally found it on YouTube like years later, I was like, wow, it's an actual show, not just like because I always remember that potato head commercial, the potato head monster. That's what it was, Monsters. It was made by the same people that made Tales from the Dark Side. But where Tales from the Dark Side didn't, you know, they had horror anthology, but they also had like, you know, other suspenseful things and stuff. You know, it wasn't just straight out monsters. This was literally, each episode had a monster in it. Like I said, it begins with the family of the monsters gathering around. Honey, it's family hour. Oh boy, candy critters. Look up the opening to Monsters. It's hilarious. But I seriously thought it was the commercial for Tales from the Dark Side. My favorite episodes are Mr. Slobber. It's this like weird creature that like drinks liquid and becomes friends with this boy and ends up like his mom and his sister are like just abusive, keep him locked up in the basement. Well, Mr. Slobber gets enough what he calls lick-em-ups, which is what anything he drinks he calls lick 'em up, lick 'em up. And every time he drinks something, he gets bigger and bigger. Well, he ends up taking care of the mom and the sister. And then another one is The Moving Finger. It is a Stephen King short story. It's about this finger that's found in this drain by this guy in the bathroom, and the finger keeps getting longer and longer, and he keeps cutting it up, and it's craziness. You gotta look up this freaking, not just that episode, but the whole show. Like I said, 3 seasons, 72 episodes. I don't know if it has a DVD release like Tales from the Dark Side does, but it needs to. But coming up at number 4 now. The Outer Limits, but the 1995 version. It was originally a series in 1963. I've only seen a few episodes, but don't remember them a lot because it was something that wasn't on TV a lot. Obviously, 63, it wasn't on new. But the 1995 version, I caught whenever I could when I was at my granny's house. It was on because it was on Showtime. So obviously, it showed things on it that kids weren't supposed to see. But this Outer Limits, the 95 version, had 152 episodes over 7 seasons. I own the box set, but it's like a different region, so it's hit or miss on whether some of the discs actually play. Unfortunately, I think that's the only version of it that exists. I think it's only like 3 or 4 episodes I can't watch, but I can probably find them online. But anyway, that has nothing to do with it. The first 6 seasons of this were on Showtime, and then the last one was actually on the Sci-Fi Network. The classic intro that they got from the 60s series, "Do not adjust your television," said. That thing, it had no host, but it had like a voiceover. And most of the episodes were standalone, although there were a few stories that continued throughout the series. My favorite episodes, one was called Valerie 23. It's about a female robot that falls in love with the person she's built for. And they eventually sleep together, but the guy realizes it's a mistake and tries to put a stop to it. But the robot starts to get angry and jealous, especially when he's starts to fall in love with I think it's a scientist that he's like working with. Starts to fall for her. The robot tries to kill her. He eventually dismantles and then kills the robot, and the robot says tells him that she's afraid of dying, and it's kind of like a depressing end. But these episodes kind of had a message with them, more oftentimes than not. It wasn't just like creepy TV. And it was more of a science fiction type show than a horror anthology. But I still loop this in with this because if you're gonna stick to just monsters and horror anthology, you're going to have a few at the top and then a bunch of other ones that maybe had a couple good episodes. That's why I put the Outer Limits on this series. People are like, oh, that's more like, science fiction. Well, I don't care. It's on my list, okay? I can put Barney on here if I want. I won't, but anyway. Trial by Fire. It's about an American president and the Russians. They're like scared of these aliens that are coming to Earth. And they're all like, oh, we got to get weapons and we got to go after them. But instead of the aliens send a message, and these scientists are like, we can decode this message, you give us more time. And of course the Americans and the Russians are like, no, we got to go after them now. But just as they're like firing off the weapons, the aliens let me see, I wrote down because it's hard to remember exact details. Yeah, before it gets translated, they fired the aliens, and the freaking aliens just instantly wipe out all the aliens and start firing on Earth like our weapons are no match for them. And it turns out that the message that they'd sent was said, let us be your friends. So again, another message there, like, before you start thinking that these people are, after you, maybe you should listen to them first. The whole Earth ends up dying because we're too, we got to take care and we got to protect ourselves. And I'm not trying to get political on here, but kind of a good message there. From Within is about a mentally challenged boy who's like bullied by the town, and the miners unearth these like weird parasites, and they affect everybody, but in the town except him, because whatever's I guess wrong with his brain. Well, I wouldn't say wrong with his brain. Whatever's different about his brain makes where the parasites can't get a hold of him. So he ends up the whole town bullies him, but when he ends up saving the whole town, they're singing a different tune. The Sentence. It's about a doctor who invents this machine that like simulates like years in prisons within a few seconds. So like the guy's in the thing for like a minute and he thinks he's served like a 20-year prison sentence. Because it's all virtual reality and he's like going through it. In real time of only a few seconds, but in mental time, 20 years or so. He ends up accidentally killing an innocent man by a heart attack because the guy didn't do the crime and couldn't deal with prison because he's not an actual criminal. But he feels so guilty about this, and it wasn't just that he did that, it was always a mistake. It's like he had this attitude of, I don't care, these people deserve it. Well, he ends up feeling so guilty that he thinks he himself is sentenced to 20 years in prison for what he did. But it turns out that he felt so bad he put himself in his own machine. And afterwards, the senator is like impressed with, after seeing what it did to the guy, that they want to use this. Because obviously, if this thing existed, you could save all kinds of money in prison and everything else. You could rehabilitate people, within seconds. Save all kinds of money. But the guy, that invented the machine, having gone through 20 years in his head of what he thought was prison, just tries to destroy the freaking machine. Which he isn't able to do, so they haul him off and probably to the nut house. But one final thing about the Outer Limits is gave me one of my favorite rides at Kings Island. If you don't know what Kings Island is, it is a theme park, roller coasters and stuff around Cincinnati. And this was Paramount owned, had the rights to Outer Limits because obviously Showtime's a part of Paramount. Still is on Paramount Plus. But they were renaming some of the rides in the park. And they actually came out with a ride. It's a completely indoor roller coaster. And it's like creepy and they got like monsters popping out of there everywhere. Anyway, it was called the Outer Limits Flight of Fear. And I was there the very first week that actually opened. And I remember standing in a long line for it. And I don't do roller coasters anymore, thanks to the Vortex, which isn't there anymore, but that one ruined me. The loops and stuff, I could never do a roller coaster after that again. Oh, I can't even think about it. But anyway, this roller coaster was pretty bad, but I guess since it was in the dark and didn't do as many upside downs and stuff, I don't know if it did any. But anyway, yeah, I remember being there for that, and of course, now I think it's still there. I think it's just called the Flight of Fear now, but it was the Outer Limits Flight of Fear. So I'll always think of that when I think of the series. But we're going to move into our top 3 now. Number 3. One that probably a lot of people won't think of because it's not like as popular as some of the other ones. But this one is Masters of Horror. Created by horror director Mick Garris. It had 2 seasons for 26 episodes. I owned the first season. I wish I had the second one. It ran from 2005 to 2007 on Showtime. No host or anything, but the intro had like creepy music and like dripping blood. It was really, really get you in the mood. And the Masters of Horror were like iconic horror directors and writers that, like I said, it was created by Mick Garris, but he would get these, like John Carpenter did one. And there was just these writers and directors would create like little 1-hour stories for each episode, so it's a true anthology. Nothing continues at all. My favorites were my favorite of all time of these is the Washingtonians. This is a crazy one in the second season, which is why I wish I owned the second season so I could have this one, where supposedly this guy found evidence that George Washington and his people called the Washingtonians were apparently cannibals, and they had these like wooden teeth that like bit through people. And once he finds out about that, like this like the secret like society of them that still exist. Like there's a secret Washingtonians like society of these like cannibals. They've, you know, oh no, you can't ruin the reputation of George Washington. So, so they come after him and his family. It is so creepy. Incident on and off a mountain road is the very first episode, and it's a great one. It's about this woman who's stalked by a monster, and she's actually, you find out later, she's driving around with her dead husband in the trunk, who is like super abusive, but actually, you know, he was like one of them crazy survivalists, and, you know, gotta own 6,000 guns, and, you know, gotta have this like bomb shelter, and, you know how to take care of yourself when the whole world goes to this. And anyway, he goes nuts with like her, and, you know, ends up, I'm not gonna say the word, it starts with an R because I'll get kicked off here for sure, but, you know, she ends up killing him, and, you know, then she wrecks her car and has to run from this like literal monster, and there's this crazy guy in the basement like chained up screaming, and it's insane. And then there's one called H.P. Lovecraft's Dreams in the Witch House, obviously based on an H.P. Lovecraft story. It's about a college student possessed by supernatural forces in this boarding house he goes to stay at, and they try to get him to kill his neighbor. Like he's got a neighbor, it's a woman and her child. You know, he starts to become friendly with her. You think they're going to get together, but he ends up babysitting the baby. But there's like these supernatural forces that are possessing him are trying to get him to kill the baby. And there's this giant rat, human-looking thing, and this witch, and it's like this show is off the wall. Cigarette Burns by John Carpenter, you know, a Halloween obviously, but this one's really creepy. It's about a rich person that hires someone to find this film that's like supposedly so scary it caused the only theater full of people that ever seen the movie to like go crazy and all start killing each other. Well, this guy's hired to find it, and well, it turns out this movie is that scary because a lot of crazy stuff happens. Another good one is called Family, directed by John Landis and starring George Wendt. A young couple moved next to their neighbor, and the neighbor's like crazy, who played by George Wendt, is like psychotic. He kills people to steal, to basically get their bones to make his like family. And he's imagining, you know, he's got a wife and kids, and they're talking to him, and he tries to lure this woman that moved in next door over to be, you know, his next wife. And all the while, his current wife, Skeleton's like, I know you're trying to be with her. She don't want nothing to do with you, and all this stuff. Meanwhile, it turns out it's all a ruse that this couple that moved next to him actually knew who he was because he had stolen and killed their daughter. So, you know, they knew who he was and went after him and ended up, you know, going psycho on him at the end. This actually series was actually, the first time I heard of Masters of Horror was actually a documentary, and it was like the Masters of Horror, all different directors getting together and talk about their movies. It was like a 4-hour like long documentary, and then later on I found out about this show, so I don't know what came out of what, if they were planning on this and they just released a documentary, or the documentary made them, you know, hey, let's get together and make these. But anyway, the documentary is really good, and the show is phenomenal. Just, you know, great. Can't say enough good things about it. But right now, we're going to move on to number 2 on our list. And the first of a show with Tales from the in it is Tales from the Dark Side, because you all know what number 1 was going to be. No surprise. But yeah, Tales from the Dark Side, 4 seasons of 92 episodes from 83 to 88, shown in syndication. Like I said before, I thought that some of the Monsters episodes were Tales from the Dark Side. But it was created by George Romero and others involved with the Creepshow movies, and featured a couple Stephen King episodes. Didn't have a host or a wraparound segment, but the intro is just iconic. Man lives in the sunlit world of what he believes to be reality. But there is. And then it continues. I could do the whole thing on here probably. They'd probably get me with a copyright for it. But, you know, iconic intro where it says there is a dark side, and then it gets all scary. But just some of these, just the greatest episodes. Favorite episode of all time of these, and probably of any anthology horror at all, is Inside the Closet, because I watched this with my dad. It's about this little... sometimes it looks cute. My kids called it the monkey in the closet, because it sort of does look like this like monkey, but it's like white, and it's obviously not a monkey, it's a monster. But it's like this, I think it's this professor's like little girl that like lives in the closet and kills people, but she's not trying. You got to see this thing. Go out of your way to find Tales from the Dark Side, Inside the Closet, if you don't know what I'm talking about or have never watched it. Seasons of Belief. This was a big one for me and my kids. I had never seen it, and well, I probably did as a kid, but don't remember it. But it's the episode about the Grither. Me and my kids would watch this all the freaking time, and had it memorized to the point of literally one year my Christmas present. Well, I'll explain what the episode is. It's about this guy, played by the old guy that plays Upson Pratt in the Creepshow movie, the one about the bugs. But he plays the dad, who looks like he's the grandpa, and his wife looks like she's like 30, 40 years younger than him. But anyway, these two bratty kids, and the parents aren't much better. They're always making up stories to try to scare them. Well, they make up this Christmas story, because it's around Christmas time, called The Grither, and they sing a song. Oh, I am the Grither. You can look it up. Again, copyright crap I have to go through. But anyway, this monster ends up turning out to be true. And me and my kids love this one so much that one year, didn't have a lot of money, hardly ever did, but one of the presents I wanted to give them, one of the presents I gave them for their birthday was this like thing that said the Crypt Keeper Club. It was, I just printed off I scanned the cover of the Tales from the Crypt Season 1 DVD, and then printed it off, and then just put like a piece of yarn through it and make it like a big necklace. And we were the Crypt Keeper Club. We would watch scary movies, and I read them scary stories. Use scary stories to tell in the dark, or Goosebumps, or stuff like that. But anyway, I actually wrote out the entire episode of Seasons of Belief, which writing out by hand in a book and drawing like horrible pictures. I wish I still had the pictures I created on the computer for this thing. But yeah, I actually made them an actual book of the whole story in there. You know, I was like super proud of this, and they loved it. But it sounds so dorky now, but yeah, that's how much we love that episode. Trick or Treat is a good one. It's the pilot episode actually of the series, where this old guy like runs everything in town. Everybody owes him money, which he's fine with, because you know he likes holding it over their head. Well, one night a year on Halloween, he puts all the IOUs somewhere in his house, and the kids have to come in and find them. And of course, the parents always make them, even if they're too scared to, you know, because it gets their family out of debt. But the guy has like all kinds of scary stuff in the house. Well, one year, I guess supernatural forces had enough of it, because a real witch shows up and kills him and throws all the IOUs out, so nobody owes anything. A Case of the Stubborns, that's a good one. That's a funny one. It's about this. Is originally was a story in like, well, I don't know if originally, but I believe that Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark had actually gotten this story from wherever they got this from, because it's about this old guy who dies, and he's like literally rotting, but doesn't know he's dead. And in Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, it's about, you know, he's dancing, "Hey, we having fun," and he just body parts fall off. Well, in this one, he refuses to believe he's dead, because, like I said, it's called A Case of the Stubborns, until they finally, you know, find a way to trick him into knowing he's dead. They put pepper in his like handkerchief, and he blows his nose, and like his nose comes off in it, and he looks at it, he's like, and then goes and lays in bed and dies, because he finally realizes he's dead. But another one, a great one, is called Halloween Candy with Mr. Killip. It's about this old guy. He doesn't like trick-or-treaters, so he makes this stuff like goblin candy, where he pours all this nasty stuff in there. But anyway, like I said, he don't like the kids, so a troll ends up visiting him and basically killing him, to where it's like his like body like wastes away, like he hadn't eaten in months. And the part I didn't like about this is his son was like over and like, come on, Dad, you gotta. Like his son bought him Halloween candy to pass out, and he didn't want to do it still. So like, come on, you got to do this. I'm tired of picking toilet paper out of your tree. You know, he tried to take care of his dad, but his dad, doesn't listen to nothing. Well, at the end, when they find the dad wasted away, the police do, they're trying to blame the son for malnourishment and not taking care of him. Like, that's the only part I didn't like about this. Like, his son didn't deserve anything. The guy deserved it, Anyway, no commentary on that. A movie actually came out of Tales from the Dark Side, which didn't make my list. Did it? I can't remember what. Yes, it did. Okay. Sorry. I wrote this out a few weeks ago, and I couldn't remember what made the list on the movies. It did, so I won't talk about it now, but a movie actually spun off of the series, after the series had concluded. And now that takes us to number 1. Tales from the Crypt. The good old Crypt Keeper titties. 7 seasons over 93 episodes from 89 to 96 on HBO. And of course, I should go back and tell you, for the ones I've done, what I own. I own the first season of Creepshow on Blu-ray. Let's see. I may have downloaded by other means, I'll just say, the first season of the 86 Twilight Zone series. I have the Night Gallery, but it's a different region. Not Night Gallery. I do have the Night Gallery, but it's the right region. I have the whole Night Gallery series. The whole Outer Limits series, like I said, it's a different country. For one season of Masters of Horror, the complete collection of Tales from the Dark Side, and the complete collection of Tales from the Crypt. I'm not trying to show off, it's just how much I love these things. Obviously, I've talked about Tales from the Crypt to death. Literally, my last bonus episode was 4 episodes of my top 40 Tales from the Crypt episodes. So, I won't go too much into it here, but enough, if you haven't watched that, so you get the sense of it. Based on the EC Comics, obviously from the 50s. The intro from going into the crypt, the music, the Crypt Keeper popping out. What more can you say? This is just perfection. And then, of course, the outro, you go out of the crypt and you hear the music playing. But each episode, of course, introduced and ended by the Crypt Keeper with all his crazy puns and costumes and going nuts and laughing. And favorite episode, of course, like I said, if you've seen that top 40 episode, was Dead Right. The one about the fortune teller and the fat guy and the woman that inherits the money and or gets the money, but not how she thinks is going to happen. And All Through the House, the Christmas episode about the guy that or the woman that kills her husband for the insurance money, and then there happens to be a deranged Santa Claus in the neighborhood. The Man Who Was Death, which was actually I think the 3rd episode, if not the 1st. I can't remember, because there's a different order depending on where you look. Anyway, it's about the executioner at the prison that does the electric chairs. Well, they abolished the death penalty, so he's out of a job, but he's going to make sure that the guilty people still end up frying. And then, of course, they bring back the death penalty just as he gets caught. The twist ending in Tales from the Crypt, that was what is most famous for. Cutting cards about the 2 gamblers that, trying to find a way to, get rid of each other. They play Russian roulette, but somehow the bullet's like a dud. Then they play chop poker and they end up chopping each other's limbs off. And at the end, they're in like a regular hospital or a mental hospital, I don't know, but they're playing checkers against each other, and they have to freaking move stuff with their noses because they have no body parts left. And The Trap, which was about the guy that tried to fake his own death to get his own life insurance and ends up getting put to death for his own death. Should have done my honorable mentions before I did this, but I'll do them after, because I just realized I had honorable mentions. I should have done them before. Like most people, when they do a countdown, they do it right before number 1. But I'm a little bit different, as you can tell. But of course, 3 movies emerged out of this show. Demon Knight, Bordello of Blood, and I can't even remember the name, Ritual, which if you've seen that movie, the Crypt Keeper, and it looks like a literally a crackhead Crypt Keeper. It's the right voice, but the puppet looks like I don't know, so stupid. But of course, the cartoon Tales from the Crypt Keeper and Secrets of the Crypt Keeper's Haunted House. But my honorable mentions now, since I should have done it already. Friday the 13th, and I didn't put it on the list because it's not an anthology series, really. I mean, in each episode, it's a continuing story where these two cousins and this older guy, the two cousins inherit the uncle's antique shop. It turns out their uncle had a deal with the devil, and there was like cursed antiques. They sell them off, and each episode is about them trying to get them back. Obviously different episodes. Different. They go to different places. Different things happen. But it's not technically an anthology series because it really is a continuing, overarching series. So that's why I didn't make the list. Alfred Hitchcock Presents, only because I don't remember many of the episodes at all. Unlike with The Outer Limits, where I seen the 95 version, there was no later version of the Alfred Hitchcock Presents. I'd like to watch the whole series, and if I do, I'll probably man, I should have added that on there because from what I have seen of them, it is a really creepy feel. And definitely seems like it belongs on the list, but just want you to know that's the only reason it didn't make the list, because I don't have, memories of the episodes. And then Nightmare Cafe. It was only like 6 episodes, but it had Robert Englund, who played Freddy, and it was like this cafe where crazy stuff happens. But like I said, it only had like 6 episodes, and I guess it's technically not an anthology because it has the continuing characters. But definitely go out of your way to find those. Some are a little hard to find, but yeah, that's my top anthology horror shows. I'm getting into movies now. We're going to get into movies next, and let's just go ahead and get into that now. Alright, we've now reached the top 10 horror anthology movies. Unlike before, I won't be talking about my favorite episodes because it's a movie. But I will be talking about the segments that make up the movies. There won't be an honorable mention for this, but there will be a dishonorable mention that I'll do before number 1. But we're going to start off with number 10, Night Gallery, the movie, which I talked a little bit about earlier. The Night Gallery TV show spun off of this movie. It was made in 1969. Our favorite, named and mispronounced, Rod Serling. It was a made-for-TV movie, too. And, like I said, it served as a pilot for the series. Serling introduces each story as a painting, just like he did in the TV show. The first one in the segment, or the first segment in it, is called The Cemetery. And this has creeped me out forever. It's about a guy who murders his uncle for his fortune, and he's buried outside in the family graveyard, which is right outside the house. Well, there's a painting of the graveyard, and the kid looks at it. The guy, he's a grown up. He looks at it one day and notices something's changed on it, and then he looks at it later on and something else has changed. Well, eventually, he's seeing his uncle get up out of the grave and come closer and closer to the house. So you can kind of guess what happens there. That one creeped me out so much. The next segment is called Eyes. It's about this mean, wealthy, blind woman that hires a doctor to do an illegal surgery on her where she can get someone's eyes to see for only 11 hours for some reason in this surgery. You can only see for 11 hours. Well, like I said, she was what we call today a Karen. Well, there's a power outage, and she ends up, like right as she's, in her house, she's going to open her eyes. She ends up falling down the steps, and then she sees the sunrise before her eyesight begins to fade. And then she beats on a glass window and it cracks and it ends where she presumably falls out and dies. So, that's what she gets for, being a Karen, basically. The escape route, or route, however you say it. It's about a Nazi who's on the run, and he's older now. I think he runs into someone who he actually tortured at the Nazi camp. And the Nazi ends up finding a way to go into a painting. He goes on like this one of this guy is fishing, and he's at peace now. The poor Nazi. But anyway, he returns the next day, and the guy recognizes him, and then the Nazi kills him so he doesn't turn him in. And then he gets arrested, but then he like breaks out and returns to the museum to try to go back into the painting. And he thinks it's the fisherman, but they'd actually moved it. When the police come looking for the guy, they only see a picture of a crucified Nazi. So he ended up getting his just due, his just desserts, by going in the wrong painting. It turns out to be the right painting. But yeah, that, like I said, that led to the TV series. Coming in now at number 9. Number 9 is The Vault of Horror, which is a sequel to one that's higher up on the list, Tales from the Crypt from 1972. This is 1973. Obviously based on the EC Comics. It's a British movie. The wraparound in this one is they enter this like mausoleum, and they're all sitting around telling each other about the stuff that's happening. And you find out at the end that they're all ghosts, and they're just having to relive the same day over and over again of what they did. Sort of like Tales from the Crypt, which I'll talk about a little later on. Sort of like that, only a little different. I guess this is what happens after, literally it's after Tales from the Crypt, so this is like, I guess, it's different stories from that, but it's basically the aftermath, and I'll talk about that in a minute, like I said. But, the first story is called Midnight Mess. It's about a vampire who, not a vampire, it's a vampire story, I should say. This guy tracks down his, sister who's, estranged from, because they inherited a fortune, but, both of them get it, but of course he wants it all to himself. So he tracks her down and kills her. But it turns out he actually doesn't actually kill her, because this town that she ran off to is a town full of vampires, including her. So they ended up getting him, and at the end they put a tap on his neck and drinking blood out of him. It's really creepy. The Neat Job. This is a crazy one. So this guy that organizes everything. He marries this woman. He's always yelling at her you put the can in the wrong spot, and he's got drawers full of nuts and bolts, and they're all labeled. Anyway, this woman, his wife, ends up going nuts and snapping. It starts off, this chain reaction starts. She makes this little mess, and it turns into a bigger mess, and she's trying to do this, and stuff just keeps falling apart. And eventually he ends up showing up at home, and she's almost snapped already. So what she does is she ends up killing the guy and putting all his parts in neatly labeled containers. It's nuts. This trick will kill you. I actually just read this story in one of the Tales from the Crypt archive books that I got. But it's about this rope trick. It's over in India, where this woman's doing this trick with this rope, where she ends up climbing up it, but it's not attached to anything. And this guy and his wife are they're magicians, but just for show. They're always trying to find the latest trick. She won't sell it to them, and they can't figure out how it works, so they just decide to kill the woman. But when they do, they end up finding out that it wasn't some kind of illusion. It was a real freaking magic rope, and the rope ends up freaking strangling them and throwing them to the floor. And when it ends, you see the woman back in the alley doing the trick again, she never even died. The rope kept her safe, or brought her back from the dead, one of the two. But anyway, they got what was coming to them. And then Bargain in Death. It's about a man buried alive in an insurance scam, where the scammers end up getting what they deserve. It's this whole plot where pretend you're dead, and just it all goes haywire. And then the final one is called Drawn and Quartered. It's about paintings that can actually kill people when they get destroyed. This guy, it's using voodoo, and this guy's getting revenge on these people that ripped him off. But he'd end up actually painting a painting of himself, and he was doing everything he could to keep it safe. Once he realized that once he can take a painting and destroy it, and it actually destroys whatever he painted. Well, he ends up keeping it in his apartment. He thinks it's safe. Well, it turns out he's got this skylight, and the skylight breaks as people are using paint thinner up above, on this building. So the paint thinner ends up getting him, and he ends up dying. It's perfect end for it. But yeah, that's the Vault of Horror. People are probably more aware of the Tales from the Crypt. It's the more popular of them. if you even consider it popular. I do. But yeah, the Vault of Horror I didn't get to see till much later on. I definitely enjoy it, but not as much as Tales from the Crypt. That's just why that's higher on the list. But that's number 9 right now. We're going to go to another Tales from something at number 8. Number 8 is 1995's Tales from the Hood. The wraparound story is about these drug dealers that were told that this guy at the mortuary, the funeral home director, found some drugs. So, of course, they're going to get him. And they go to this funeral home, and the funeral home director, as they're going to look for the drugs, decides to start telling them stories about why the people there are dead. And, of course, the segments are the different stories in it. And then, of course, in between is the little segments where he's like, the drug dealers are getting increasingly like more impatient, like, come on, just give us the stuff. Or as they call it, the shit. They kept referring to, give us the shit, the shit, the shit. Oh, yes, I'll give you the shit. And that's a theme through that and the second. And I know there's a third movie. It's probably in that too. Tales from the Hood 2 is like insanely bad. It's good type movie. This definitely didn't make the list. Anyway, the individual stories. The first one's called Rogue Cop Revelation. It's about a, and this is made by Spike Lee. So obviously they're, you know, a lot of racial themes throughout the movie, especially in this one here. It's about a black cop who, you know, is trained by these other cops, and they're racist, and this like black like civil rights leader, not Martin Luther King, but sort of meant to be that type of, you know, person, ends up getting beaten and killed and made it look like he like overdosed. Well, the black cop knows the truth, but he feels so guilty for not doing anything because, you know, he wanted to keep his job, that he ends up like becoming an alcoholic, quitting the force. Well, like a year later, the guy that got killed, his ghost comes back and drives him to like gather all the cops there at his grave on the anniversary, and then the cop comes back and kills them all. And the black cop, you know, that's not a cop anymore, his punishment for not doing anything is he ends up getting like locked away in a mental home because, you know, they said he snapped and killed everybody. So he ended up getting what he deserved too. Boys Do Get Bruised. It's about this kid that has an abusive like stepfather, and sort of like the one I talked about, the Vault of Horror, where, you know, the paintings could be destroyed and it would kill the people. He would draw these people and like destroy them, and would actually kill them. Well, he's using this on his stepdad, and there's a teacher involved, and it's a crazy story, but it's a really good one. KKK comeuppance, you can guess. It's about this white politician guy. He's living in like a plantation. If that isn't bad enough, then he finds these dolls that are like from like Civil War era, and they like go after him. And then the last segment is called Hardcore Convert. This is like a crazy one. It has flashing lights and stuff in it, so, well, you see flashing lights in my video. If they bother you, definitely don't watch this last segment, because it's like, it gets crazy at one point. But about this prisoners trying to rehabilitate them in like a crazy way, where it's like using intensive therapy and showing him everything he's done. But it turns out to be a dream at the end, because he gets shot to death because he doesn't, at the end, he doesn't, like, you know, say what he's done is wrong. So, and ends up that whole rehabilitation thing was just a dream, and that you see him there lying there to death, which actually ties into the wraparound segment at the end, because it turns out the 3 drug dealers that are there to get the shit, as they call it, reveals to be the guys from the last segment's killer. And, you know, they figured this out at the end of the story. You know, wait a minute, how do you know all this? And it turns out they're not there at a funeral home to get drugs. They're in hell, as he says. Just a really good, creepy movie. Like, everything ties in perfectly, especially with the wraparound and the last story actually being part of the wraparound. But right now, we're going to move to number 7. 7 is Trilogy of Terror 2, 1996 sequel to the movie that's actually a number 6 on my list, right above this. I put them back to back. It has the same premise as the other one, which I'll talk about, where the same there's no wraparound in it, but it's the same actress playing a different role and 3 stories throughout it. The first story is, and the actress in this, her name's Lizette Anthony. The first story is called The Graveyard Rats. It's about this woman that's like married to this older guy, obviously for the money, and then she starts cheating on him with this other guy, and it's a whole bunch of stuff that happens where they think they killed the guy, and then there's like these giant rats. It's a crazy visual, like these giant rats eating them, and like it's so cheesy, but it's also so creepy. Sorry about the clearing of the throat crap. Bobby is about this woman whose son dies, and they like live on this like mountain like house that like overlooks the ocean or something. But anyway, she ends up like bringing him back to life, but he's like completely evil, so sort of reminds you like Pet Sematary. And then the third story is called He Who Kills, which is actually this Zuni fetish doll, they call it, but it's like this, like, we always call it the troll looking thing, because it's this thing with this sharp teeth and going crazy. If you've seen Trilogy of Terror, the original movie, which is, like I said, up next on my list, he's the same one from that, just back in this because, you know, he's so iconic from that movie, they brought him back. Which, of course, like I said, that leads us into number 6. Of course, Trilogy of Terror, the original movie from 1975. And I should have said the last one was actually a made-for-TV movie. I believe this was a theatrical movie, the original Trilogy of Terror. And it's the same concept. One actress playing 3 roles. Well, actually, in this, she played 4 roles. And the actress is Karen Black, which I know mostly from one of my favorite horror movies of all time, Burnt Offerings, which didn't make this list because it's not an anthology. But it was definitely, it was second on my top 50 horror movies of all time, to show what an impact that had. And Burnt Offerings is always the last movie I watch on Halloween, like the last one of the night. But anyway, that's not that. This is Trilogy of Terror. The first, no wraparound in this one either. First one is called Julie, and each one's called whatever it's called based on the woman's character. But she plays this teacher, and this guy in her class, she's a college teacher. He thinks he gives her something to knock her out to R word, I ain't gonna say the rest, her, and basically just take control of her. It turns out that he wasn't actually controlling her. She'd been controlling him all the time. Like she was some kind of witch or whatever it was. But then she got bored with him and then made him have a heart attack and die. And, you know, it turns out that she like did this to everybody. Like, you know, you think that he's like this evil guy. Well, she made him do this. But anyway, the second one's called Millicent and Therese, or however that's said. But anyway, she's basically playing 2 roles of like the sister. One sister is like the goody two-shoes sister, and the other one's like this wild one, always sleeping with all these men. Well, it turns out that that it isn't actually 2 different people. It's the same person, and when she goes to kill her sister, she actually kills herself. And then, of course, the last one's called Amelia, and that's the one about the troll, the Zuni doll, whatever it is, where it just goes absolutely nuts, putting it in the oven and everything else. Like, those troll segments are so creepy. Well, right now we've reached our top 5. Number 5 is Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. I touched on this earlier, obviously, when I talked about Tales from the Dark Side, the series. I've forgotten where it was on the list, just because, you know, it'd been a few weeks since I made the actual list, and, you know, forgot what I included. But this definitely, I should have remembered, made the list. Unlike the regular Tales from the Dark Side show, there is wraparound segments in this. Starts about with this woman who captures this. It's like a witch. She captures this boy, and she's going to cook him and eat him. And the boy's like chained up in the dungeon and finds the Tales from the Dark Side book, and is trying to prolong him getting killed by, you know, because it's her favorite book as a kid. So he keeps trying to tell her stories out of it, you know, try to buy more time. And this one's actually considered to be the true... Well, actually, I'll leave that when I talk about my dishonorable mention in a minute. Before I get to number one, I'll leave that part till then because it fits more there. But it was directed by John Harrison, who did the Creepshow music. You know, that iconic creepy music in the Creepshow movie, which, by the way, is playing in my head. It's just like stuck in my head. But like I said, there's the wraparound, and then there's the stories. Lot 249 is about this guy who he is cheated out of like the scholarship by this woman that wants it for her brother, and he ends up finding getting a mummy, and ends up using it to get revenge for him. And a lot of crazy stuff happens in that one. Lot 249 refers to the lot of the I guess he got it at an auction. It's about a mummy, and it's just super creepy. The second one was actually going to be included in Creepshow 2, and is a Stephen King story called The Cat from Hell. It's about this guy who has a pharmacy company, and he killed a lot of cats testing drugs on them. Well, one day this cat shows up and kills off his sisters that he lives with, a housekeeper, and now it's after him. Well, this guy hires a hitman, and he can't even kill the hitman. Can't even kill the hitman's like, a cat? Come on, really? But the cat ends up killing him, and then of course getting the drug company owner at the very end of the segment. And then the final segment is let's see, it's called Lover's Vow. It's about this guy that witnessed, down on his luck artist. He ends up witnessing this gargoyle kill somebody, and then the same night he meets the woman that he ends up falling in love with. But before he actually meets her, the gargoyle is like, if you promise to never tell anybody, I'll let you live. He's like, of course, sure. But then 10 years go by, they've got kids. He's got kids with this woman, and he's like, on the anniversary, he's like, I guess just wanted to get out to somebody of what he'd seen, so he tells her, and then she starts going nuts, like, you said you'd never tell. And it turns out that the woman was actually the gargoyle, and she turns back into a gargoyle, and their kids turn into gargoyles and kill him. It's creepy. And of course the wraparound ends with he's telling another story, panicking because she's coming after him. Well, he's making up a story, and ends up the kid got loose and got... Anyway, he ends up putting the witch in the oven. And then eating cookies, because she was feeding him the whole time to fatten him up for the meal. I guess a bunch of witches were coming over to eat this kid. But anyway, he ends up getting the best of her and puts her in the oven. Sort of like a Hansel and Gretel type thing. But right now, speaking of Stephen King with that story, we're going to number 4. Stephen King's Cat's Eye. 1985 movie. It's based on 2 of his short stories from Night Shift, and the final story and the wraparound story were written for the movie. The wraparound is about this cat that goes throughout. The cat is part of the whole. Cause it's called Cat's Eye. You don't see the whole movie through the cat's eye. You're not looking through the cat's eye the whole time. You are in some of the wraparound segments, but you're seeing what this cat's experiencing. And the cat keeps seeing this little girl saying, help me, which plays into the last segment. But it's really cool in the front. You see the cat running from Cujo, and then they go around the corner, and here comes Christine. So, the little Stephen King Easter eggs in there. I think that was the first ever Stephen King Easter egg type movie is this. And of course, it's been in all his series and stuff since. But, the first story is called Quitters Inc. It's about a guy trying to quit smoking, and he finds this company, and they're nuts. If we see you doing it, we're gonna come after you. They find the cat, and they put him in this room. It's electric shock therapy type thing, but the floor is electric, and they play this crazy music, and it makes it look like he's dancing, but the cat's being shocked. Well, the guy didn't believe it, and he got caught. So they bring his wife in, and they shock her. And next they threaten his daughter. She's special needs at the special school. So anyway, he eventually ends up quitting. But then they're because it's these people are the mob, basically. And the guy's like, now that you're done, you're putting on some weight. You're gonna have to lose some of this. And he's like, oh, what's next? You're gonna come over and do this? And he's like, no, we'll just chop off your wife's little finger. And he thinks it's a joke. Well, he's at dinner with some of the other people that have graduated that program, and he looks over and sees his friend's wife is missing a finger. So really creepy. Like I said, the cat involved in that is they capture the cat and put him in that room. The next one's probably I like the last one a lot, but I think this one's actually my favorite, just because of suspense. It's called The Ledge. It's about this another mob guy basically, whose wife is like cheating on him with this like tennis guy, and he sets up this thing to capture him, and if you get through this, then you can have my wife and all this money. What he has to do is he makes this guy walk around this ledge of his building, like barely any room, nowhere to hold on to, and he's trying to scare the guy into falling the whole time. And the guy, somehow ends up getting around, and he gets in, and of course, the guy had no intentions of letting him have his wife and the money. Throws his wife's head at the guy. Well, he ends up, the cat, I should say the cat involved in this is like, at the beginning, the mob guy sees the cat trying to cross the road, and like they take bets on whether they think he's going to get hit by a car, and he don't think the cat's going to get hit, so he picks up the cat. The cat ends up tripping the guy with the gun. It might have been intentional, I don't know, but the way this cat was, it probably was. Which I should mention, the cat's a good thing. I know you think Stephen King and cats, Pet Sematary. This is definitely, the cat reminds me of church, but it was like good church. He ends up, the tennis guy makes the mob guy walk around the building, and of course he can't make it and falls off to his death. But the very last segment of this is called General, or the General, I think, which is what they end up calling the cat. The little girl, by the way, that you've been seeing throughout, well, you haven't been seeing, if you watch it, you see throughout, that's trying to get the cat to help her, is played by Drew Barrymore, which, of course, Firestarter and E.T., which I've recently just seen, by the way, I know. Don't kill me, I've only recently seen E.T. Don't ask me how, I've never seen it before. Anyway, back to this. The parents, especially the mom's like, you can't let the cats in sleep with you at night, it'll steal your breath, or some crap that they've heard, which is like an old wives' tale, I think. It's like a cat will steal your breath or something. My cat sleeps on my hip all the time, ain't tried to steal my breath yet. Hurts my hip, but anyway, what ends up happening is there's like this little troll that lives in the wall. I know I talked about the troll earlier with the Trilogy of Terror, but this is like a little short troll with this, like, the little knife is like trying to kill the girl and like steal her breath. Well, the cat's there and saves him, and ends up throwing the troll on a record player, which ends up playing this song that's like played during that first part where the cat's in the room, with the electric floor. Plays that song with the troll spinning around, and finally the parents see him and believe it, and they're allowed to keep the cat, which, is, like I said, is called the General. So a great way that a wraparound can, and those last two, Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, and Cat's Eye, shows a great way that a wraparound can actually not just be a wraparound, but actually be involved in the story. But with that, we're going to move into our top three. Coming number 3 on my list of top 10 horror anthology movies is Creepshow 2, 1987 classic. 3 stories and a wraparound, and it was originally supposed to have 2 more stories. One that I talked about earlier, the Cat from Hell from Cat's Eye. But it's a Stephen King and George Romero, but neither one had that like as much involvement as they did with the original Creepshow. But they contributed to it. It was mostly the people in George Romero's production company. I think it was called Laurel Entertainment, which ended up doing the Tales from the Dark Side. Well, in this, the wraparound was, animated. It was about a boy that was getting bullied, so he reads Creepshow, and he ends up getting this like Venus flytrap that eats meat, and the guy that sells the comic books at the shop, he's like, oh, it's probably just petunia bulbs. Well, it ends up being a real plant that eats the bullies. That's the wraparound. It doesn't actually play into the stories. The stories are just stories themselves. But great stories. The first one's called Old Chief Woodenhead. It's about this old guy and his wife. They run this general store in this town. It's like the town's base. It's called Dead River, and they say it's living up to its name because, you know, drought and, you know, people moving out and just no businesses left. They're going broke. They're letting people basically take food for basically IOUs. But you know, there's a Native American that you know, owes them and their tribe owe them a bunch of money. So he brings in all these like precious jewels and stones and stuff, and saying, you know, you hold on to these until we can pay you back. And of course the guy's like, I don't want to take these things from your people. And he's like, he insists, he's like, as long as you have these, you know, we're not beggars, you know, we can still have our pride. So, you know, because the guy's nice, and, you know, the woman's like, these people take advantage of you. And he's like, come on, you got to have faith in people. Well, it ends up after he leaves, this guy's nephew is this jerk. And he's got two idiot friends. One's fat, literally named Fat Stuff, and the other one's Rich Boy. But this guy thinks he's going to be an actor. There's millions of women waiting to run this hair through their legs. And it's just the most ridiculous stuff. Anyway, they're robbing them, and they want the precious jewels, but the guy's like, these belong to your people. And the guy accidentally shoots the guy's wife, so then he ends up shooting him. Well, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Outside the store at the beginning, you see the old guy is doing the war paint on the wooden Indian that's outside. Well, his owner got killed, so that's what makes him come to life, and he goes after and kills all three of these people, especially the last one, scalps the guy. And at the very end, after everybody's dead, the Indian goes back to where he was. The head of the ones that like brought the jewels in comes by, and basically you can tell by the way he looks at the Indian, he knows what he did. And then we get the second one called The Raft. This is creepy. It's about these 4 teenagers that go out on this raft, and it's kind of chilly out because, like, I guess towards the end of summer. By the way, during this scene, like the main actor actually ended up getting hypothermia because of the freaking cold water, because it really was filmed during a cold time of the year. I think they were in Arizona or somewhere near Arizona, but it was still cold. But yeah, they go out to this raft, and this like stuff that they think is an oil slick, because it looks like oil or something, but like this black goo ends up eating them one by one, like just like disintegrating their body. And at the end, it's this one guy's left with this other girl, and like they weren't together. They were actually with other people that both died, but like he'd been like obsessed with her for a while, so they're supposed to be watching each other while they're laying on this raft, avoiding this death sludge. But he's like, you know what? I think I'm just gonna do something to her in her sleep. Which, again, I ain't gonna say the word on here. But as he's doing that, she wakes up, and turns out he wasn't watching good enough because the thing's eating her from underneath. So he's like, I'm gonna take this opportunity to go. So he like takes off, and of course when the thing's done eating her, it turns around and goes after her quickly. But he gets on the shore, and he's maybe this far from the shore. I don't know if you can. And he's like, I beat you. Like, yeah, you really went that far. And this thing leaps out of the water and gets him. Like, come on, idiot. And the thing that I always remember to my dying day about this is they left the car on all night with the radio playing. Like, not the car running, just the radio on. Like, that thing had to easily have been on for well over 12 hours. Like, what car battery lasts that long? But anyway, the final one is called The Hitchhiker. It's about this woman that's with a male prostitute, because I guess she ain't getting what she needs from her husband, her rich husband. But she's wanting to keep everything, you know. She don't want her husband finding out, so she's trying to get home, and she's late. So she's like rushing, and she ends up hitting this hitchhiker and doesn't stop. It's a hit and run, just keeps going. And she keeps seeing him over and over again because he's back from the dead after her, and he's just like relentless. She ends up getting home finally, thinking it was a dream, and she pulls into the garage, and here he comes. Thanks for the ride, lady. Thanks for the ride, he keeps saying as he's trying to kill her, and finally does kill her at the end. Should say Stephen King made a cameo in this as a truck driver. But yeah, Creepshow 2, such a great movie. But right now we're going to move on to number 2 on the list. Bet you probably thought this was number 1 just based on the title, but number 2 is Tales from the Crypt, the 1972 British movie. Of course, based on the EC Comics. And this was a good 15 so years before the TV series. So, this was the first Tales from the Crypt, of anything like besides the comic books. The wraparound story is these people enter this thing. They don't know it's a crypt yet, but they don't even remember how they got there. But they're like talking, and they go into this room, and there's this guy who turns out to be the crypt keeper, but it's not the crypt keeper you're thinking of. That guy. It's just like this old bald guy, like in a robe, and he's like sitting there, like they're all wanting to know why they're there. And he's like, what are you going to do after you leave here? And they're all thinking about it. And then that's how you get these stories. The first story is And All Through the House, which, if that sounds familiar, which I just talked about during the TV portion of this, was actually one of the first 3 episodes of the TV series. This one, there isn't too much difference in it other than in the TV series, when the woman kills her husband for the money, it's, the guy's abusive anyway. You don't really feel sorry for the guy. In this one, you do. The guy's like super nice, and I think it's her fiance in this one. But, he's super nice to her, but she ends up killing him anyway. Same premise, and the same thing happens. Except the difference is in the Santa Claus. Also, the blood in this looks so fake and orange in the movie. But the Santa Claus in the TV show, demented and creepy looking. And this one just looks like some crazy old demented guy. Like, he don't look like psycho, he just looks old. And it looks like he ends up massaging her to death at the end. I make fun of this a lot, but I still love this one. The second story is called Reflection of Death. About this guy who's cheating on his wife, and it's like leaving his family, not even telling them, because he found this new woman and they're going to go start a new life together. Well, he gets with the new woman, they get in a car, and they have this car wreck, and he can't find her, but he's like stumbling around, and everybody he runs into is like scared to death of him because he doesn't realize he looks like a monster, because apparently it had been a year since the crash happened. So, he tries to go home. I guess his wife already has a new husband or something then, doesn't recognize him, just other than a monster. Then he goes to the woman he was leaving with, her apartment, and she opens the door and doesn't scream, but when he tells her who she is, she's like, you can't, he died in a car crash. And turns out the reason she ain't screaming is because she got blind from the car wreck. Then he wakes up in the car after dreaming that, like the whole thing was a dream. But it turns out to be one of those looping things because it happens again. So you would assume that that just happens to the end of time. He has to relive his own death. Sort of like the Vault of Horror movie. The next one's called Poetic Justice. This one's a really crappy one. Like, not crappy story, but like these people in this. This nice guy who's played by Peter Cushing, of course, a horror legend. But in this, he's just this nice neighbor. And he happens to live in this rich neighborhood, and these people want him out, especially this one guy's son that lives across the street from him. So they do everything they can to make this guy try to move, because he won't sell his place, because it's where his late wife and him lived. He gets him fired from being a garbage man. He ends up, he collects stuff and gives it to the kids. Not in any creepy way, but today they'd call him a creep. But that's basically what they were assuming. Like, you don't know what he does with those kids. So all the parents, who trusted the guy before, all of a sudden now like, oh, stay away from that creepy man. And then they make it look like his dogs tore up the neighbor's prized rose collection. So all his dogs get taken away, and that's still not enough. So then they end up getting because it's Valentine's Day, and sending him Valentine's cards, presumably from everybody in the neighborhood, and they're all, telling him to basically to off himself and everything else, so he does. Well, a year later, comes back Valentine's Day, those two rich people are sitting there, happy that the guy that was ruining his property values is gone. Well, he's not so gone, because he comes back from the dead, and at the end, the older guy, which wasn't as bad as the younger guy, but he still was, ends up opening this homemade Valentine's Day that the monster wrote. It says, "You were mean and cruel right from the start. Now you really have no..." And he opens up, and it's the guy's heart, and then the old guy screams. Just perfect. The next one was called "Wish You Were Here." This is another take on the monkey's paw, but this like this statue, where this guy's like, I've watched this a few times, but it wasn't until recently I realized what he did, because everybody in this is always has, you know, something bad about them. I was wondering why this guy was in this place, and you'll find out what this place is at the end when I tell you, unless you've seen it. But it turns out like he's like done a bunch of like very bad things to get his money. Well, it turns out he's like going broke and is gonna have to sell things, so that's why he's looking at the statue they got, and you know they read it, and it turns out it's just like the monkey's paw. You know, the woman wishes for money. And the guy gets a call all of a sudden from his lawyer, who he just left, just saying he was broke. So, but on the way, he ends up dying. He looks like looking in his mirror, and I can't tell if it's just bad effects where it's a guy riding a motorcycle with like a skull-looking helmet, or if it's supposed to be the guy's a skeleton. With this movie, with some of the bad effects, I can't really tell. But anyway, he ends up crashing and dying. So the woman finds out, and she's like, I made this happen, so I wish him back alive right where, you know, before he had his heart attack. Well, turns out, or not heart attack, but before the car crash, I gave it away. Turns out the people from the funeral home bring him in a coffin dead, because right before the car crash, he actually died originally from a heart attack. Well, then she's like already nuts about everything. She's like, I wish him back alive and he'll never die. Well, or just the way, you know, the way he is, and he ends up, you know, back alive immediately, but he's embalmed, so he's in like complete pain, screaming. She's hacking him up, his intestines are coming out, but he's not dying, and like craziness, just like you'd expect from a monkey's paw type story. And then the last story is called Blind Alleys, which was also a Tales from the Crypt episode under a different name and a little bit different circumstances. It's about this like general in like the British Army who gets control of this. He's like the new superintendent of this home for the blind, where these blind people are at. And he immediately starts cutting the budget. They have to eat slop and dishwater. Then to where I got my thing for Soup Boy, where it looks like he's eating nasty soup. Anyway, that's some personal stuff. And they, you know, turn off the heat at a certain hour, and there's not enough blankets because he got to give the blanket for his dog to lay on. And one of the people dies from being sick because of all this. So they decide to teach him a lesson. They use this bacon, or what passes to be bacon, to like lure the guy's dog away, you know, because he gets vicious. Locks him in a room, and then they end up kidnapping the guy, locking him in a room, and they're building stuff the whole time and keeping him in there, and they're not letting the dog eat, and they're not letting the guy eat. Finally, they let the guy go, and he's walking down the hallway, and you know, he finds razor blades on the wall, and then all of a sudden they turn out the lights, and they let the dog out. So now he's got to run back down this thing, and there's razor blades, and the dog ends up getting him. It's just super what he deserves. He so deserved that. But you find out that all these stories, they think that these are things, because in their mind, like, these are things they're going to do, like not going to die or anything, but like yeah, I'm going here to get rid of my neighbor, or I'm going to go home and kill my husband for the money. You know, they're like, how do you know this? And it turns out they're not things that they were going to do. They things that they did do, and they're dead. And now they're in hell. Like I said, it sort of goes with the Vault of Horror later on that came out the next year, where instead of, you know, learning about these things, they're just sitting there, you know, in hell already, and that's what they had to do, is think about what they did over and over and relive it over and over. But yeah, that was 1972's Tales from the Crypt, and now we're going to get to number one and the dishonorable mention before number one. I'll remember it this time. Dishonorable this time instead of honorable. Honorable mention, this movie does not belong on any list other than worst of anything list. Doesn't belong on best of anything. Creepshow freaking 3. That movie is straight up disgusting gutter trash. It only existed because someone bought the rights to use the Creepshow name, and it has nothing to do with Romero, nothing to do with Stephen King. It's one of those movies that's so bad it's good, but it still pisses me off the way it tries to market itself as Creepshow. And what I was trying to say earlier that I was alluding to, but I stopped myself, is a lot of people, including those involved with the movies, consider Tales from the Dark Side, the movie, the true Creepshow 3. You can even consider Cat's Eye one of the Creepshow movies, but Creepshow 3 itself, garbage. Anyway, our number one movie now, and you probably could have guessed it, is Creepshow. This is the perfect horror anthology, movie, show, whatever you want to, category you want to put it in. Not just even horror anthology, just anthology, period. And not even that, just movie, period. This thing is perfect. The wraparound story is about this kid that he's reading comic books and his dad don't like it. He's like, "You reading this trash?" And slaps the kid. Played by Tom Atkins, of course, from Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Love that movie. But, plays this abusive dad, and he throws away the comic book. And you see the creep, as he's called, at the window, like, smiling at him. You think it... And the kid was played by Stephen King's son, by the way, in the movie. But you'd think, a monster looking in the window at a kid, the kid's going to be scared. No, the kid's, like, laughing with him, because they have this plan, obviously. But then we start seeing the stories from the Creepshow comic book. Which is, of course, based on the EC comic books, Tales from the Crypt. Stephen King and George Romero both loved those series, so they obviously, put a lot of that into this. And this, if you watch this movie, it's stylistically, all the stories are styled different, but they all remind you of comic books with the lighting and just, this movie is perfect. The first story is my favorite, and a lot of people that I've seen in the Creepshow group I'm a part of, yes, I'm part of a Creepshow group, and Return of the Living Dead. But a lot of people say that this is probably the weakest of the stories. I don't think so, because it's just straight up like horror. It's called Father's Day. And the premise is just silly if you think about it. It's about this family where they get together every Father's Day because this woman killed her dad on Father's Day because he was like overbearing and he was like slamming his cane down. "I want my cake, it's Father's Day." Well, she couldn't take it anymore. And it turns out that the guy had actually had her, the only man she'd ever loved, murdered. And she knew about it. But she still put up with her dad. Because he was the rich one of the family. But she finally snapped and killed him with this ashtray, which, by the way, appears in every segment. And is in every segment of the TV series. It wasn't in the second one. But anyway, she visits his grave, and I don't know what's specifically, particular about this Father's Day, but this Father's Day he decides to come back. Although it's funny, it happens right after he spills whiskey into his grave. I guess that's what brings corpses that wants cake back, is whiskey. But anyway, he comes out, and of course, a monster pops out. What are they going to do? I'm going to kill you or just kill him? No, he starts, "I want my cake." This guy really wanted this freaking cake. And he got it too. He ends up killing everybody in the family. And at the end, he's like, "I got my cake." And the two people are left. You can just assume that he killed them too. I guarantee he just let them go. I don't know if he returned to the grave after that. It's got Ed Harris in one of his first roles in it. The tombstone crushes his head and he goes, "Arr!" When he could have easily moved out of the freaking tombstone. By the way, that's the one that, if you watch my Tales from the 90's podcast, I talk about my my dad saying he was in the movie, and that was his actor name, Ed Harris, and I believed it forever. And a lot of my love for these movies comes from my dad, too, so especially this one. But the second story, The Lonesome Death of Jordy Verrill. This is played by Stephen King, and it's just insanity. It's hilarious, but there's horror to it. About this idiot, that's what I can describe him, idiot, played by Stephen King, and he plays him perfectly. Finds this meteor and ends up touching it and getting the stuff on him, and grass or whatever fur, I think of it as grass, some kind of plant or something, starts growing all over everything, including himself, and it just consumes him, and he keeps thinking about, Well, at first he's going to take the meteor to up the college, as he calls it. And he's going in and he's giving him all $200 and more money. He's like, keep accounting. Edith Verrill didn't raise no idiots, as he says. But then he throws water on it to cool the meteor off because he burned himself touching it originally. And it breaks and he's like, $200 for a broken meteor? Now all this stuff's in his head with the same guy. And then later on, he's thinking about going to the doctor because of this stuff on it. And it's the same guy, but now he's going to cut his fingers off. And turns out the guy is his dad he keeps thinking of. He's like, you're not going to get in the tub, are you? Because, the stuff is spreading and growing more. And he looks down, he's like, oh no, not there. Well, at the end, it like consumes him so much, and you can tell it's like going down his throat, and he ends up offing himself at the end. The third story actually has Leslie Nielsen, and it's not funny. Leslie Nielsen is like this creepiest, most serious role I think ever. Plays this guy, his wife's cheating on him with this one guy. Sort of reminds me of the Cat's Eye story with the rich mob guy. Well, he's like this rich, like, cable guy type thing, right? Like, he's got all these TVs and technology and stuff. He ends up, finding out about them. Shows up at the guy's house and takes him to the beach, and it's like, I'm going to take you to her, because he plays this tape where he's got her captured, and he's, going to kill him, but he turns around and he's got a gun. So, takes him to the beach. It ends up making the guy bury himself alive in sand, with his head sticking out, and then just leaves him there. Turns out he'd already done that to the woman, and, of course, the water comes in and they drown. Well, he goes home that night and gets a visit from the two people he buried, back from I wouldn't say grave, back from the beach. Come to the beach. You can hold your breath. He's like, I can hold my breath for a long time. Just it's like, it's funny at the very end, but like, it's Leslie Nielsen. If your only experience with Leslie Nielsen is Naked and those type of things, you would think that he's about to play some funny character. And some of the stuff he says is funny, but he's not even trying to play it as funny. He's playing it as straight as can be, and he's perfect in this role. The next one is the longest one of the movie, and it's The Crate. And it's really a simple story about this guy. He's got this overbearing wife that nobody likes, especially him. But then he's also got this professor friend that they all work at this college, and the janitor finds this like box under the steps, and they don't know what's in it. Turns out to be this like the name they've given the character over the years, like the people that worked on the movie, not the official name of the character in the movie. They call him Fluffy. You think it's something nice, but it's like, just like my kids said, the monkey in the closet before, they call this the monkey in the box. He does sort of resemble some kind of like demon monkey or something. But anyway, this thing like eats people, and the guy ends up tricking his overbearing wife into like going in there, and the thing eats it, or eats her. Like, well, I said it right the first time. Eats it, and the guy chains it up and throws it at the bottom of the lake. You see at the very end, he like breaks out. Oh, me and like everybody else always hoped that the Creepshow series would like have him appear again, but the series is over, so I guess Fluffy's never coming back. Maybe he just couldn't swim and he ended up drowning. Don't ask me how he lived hundreds of years in the crate. But the last one that nobody seems to like because it's so creepy, and my mom actually left off of the tape that she taped off of TV just because she didn't like the story and the bugs. It's called They're Creeping Up on You, about this horrible, evil guy, like, rich guy that, like, he just is horrible. Like I said, he doesn't care if employees that he fired kill themselves. I should have said unalive themselves. Don't ban me off here. He doesn't care about any of that. And he's like super germaphobe. He's got this like spotless apartment with all this weird technology in it, but he ends up getting cockroaches. These bugs! And just, he was racist, and he's just everything you can think of as a bad quality of a person. Well, these bugs end up getting him, and in case you're squeamish, let's just say that thousands of them get into his body and explode out of his throat and everything else, and I probably said too much. You people are like, ugh. But if you're watching this, you probably don't care. But yeah, but you find out that the wraparound for the whole movie is the kid, just like the kid in the second one that ordered the Venus flytrap. He ordered a voodoo doll of his dad, and at the end he's stabbing him in the neck, and like you hear the creepy Creepshow music, and he's laughing. It's just perfect movie there. I love Creepshow. Like I said, Creepshow 3. I don't want to talk about it anymore. But yeah, a lot of people probably thought I would name Tales from the Crypt as my favorite anthology movie. It is my favorite series, and it's my second favorite anthology movie. But when it comes to the anthology movies themselves, Creepshow is about as perfect as you can get. Thank you guys for joining me for this one. I know it's still ways off, but Thursday, November 13th, will actually be the next bonus episode, number 14. And nothing to do with the month of November or anything, but I just decided to do one about video games. I don't know exactly what format it'll be. Just talking about my favorite games and systems, memories of playing the games and different systems. You know, I don't think I'm going to rank anything. I may say that for another one. Just video game memories is what I'll call it. But that's like I said, that's actually it's only a couple weeks away from now. But anyway, that's next month. I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I'll see you on the next one.